Welcome back, you all, for another chapter of CHD 210, Educating Exceptional Children. On the screen before you over to the right, you will see two books. This is our textbook. And if you will go back in, you'll be able to link into them if needed. But you should all have your own textbook to reference throughout the lecture as well as the quiz. So let's go on into chapter 10, which is called Tabletop Activities. Tabletop activities can offer wonderful opportunities for children with special needs to not only develop important fine motor and school readiness skills, but also to engage in activities that are creative, expressive, and enjoyable. And during this chapter, we're going to talk about specific adaptations of these activities that might maximize enjoyment and educational value for children with special needs. So let's just dig right on in and find out what is the value of a tabletop activity and actually what is it? So in addition to being fun and creative, tabletop activities have many potential benefits for children with special needs. Very often, all developmental domains are being addressed while we're doing these activities. So basically what we're saying is these are activities that children may do in a small group setting while sitting at a table, things that we can bring over to them, okay? So first thing we might encounter is that fine motor skills for school readiness. A lot of times children with special needs may require extra assistance in learning fine motor skills that will be necessary for school success throughout their schooling, and like using a paintbrush, holding a pencil, cutting, those types of things. So tabletop is a great time to do that. Children with cognitive and information processing disabilities often have difficulty learning and understanding task sequencing, or basically task sequencing is the sequence of behaviors and events that make up an activity. So explaining, demonstrating, and reviewing steps of an activity will really provide important support for the development of cognitive processes in these children. So going over the directions, those types of things. Also, explaining in detail and going over them, saying it several times. Also providing a visual support, showing them first you're going to do this, then this, then this. Okay, those are some things that are really good for task sequencing. And demonstrating cause and effect and learning key vocabulary and concepts. And we'll talk about those as we move on through. So planning tabletop activities for children with special needs. Tabletop activities may require more careful preparation than other activities, especially when children with special needs are included in the classroom. Teachers must think through not just all the materials that will need to be prepared, but also the adaptations that may be necessary, as well as the level of support that they may need to give the children so that they can be independent as possible and also meet the goals of their IEP. So careful preparation is key. We also want to make sure that we provide clear transitions into the tabletop activity, showing the materials that they're going to be using, major steps in the sequence of the activity, what you plan for them to do, what's the outcome of the activity. Going ahead and kind of front loading that before they transition into the activity could be helpful, as well as making sure that you have a consistency with your procedures, like how they're going to go about doing it. That kind of that makes it kind of a low stress activity. So supporting learning objectives through tabletop activities. You see in front of you 5 areas that we can support in a tabletop activity, especially when they are carefully planned. can help children with special needs accomplish their IEP and developmental objectives. So let's talk about fine and gross motor skills. Difficulty with fine motor skills is often one of the greatest challenges to full participation in a tabletop activity, it's because they lack those fine motor skills. Early childhood teachers need to systematically encourage and support the movements and coordination for skills such as cutting, painting, folding paper, gluing, stirring things, pouring things. All of those actions I just said require both fine motor movement, which would be like manipulating their arms and their hands, as well as eye-hand coordination, and also some gross motor, some skills like sitting and balance, control of their head, their trunk, their neck, those kinds of things. And we have to think about, when we're talking about kids with special needs, that we may be talking about someone who has cerebral palsy. So that's where those gross motor control things come into play as well. One thing we really want to make sure that we do as early childhood teachers is that we reach out to fellow professionals, occupational therapists and physical therapists. They can, so many times, they can discuss the nature of the child's motor difficulty and also make suggestions to the classroom teacher about specific strategies that would enhance the experiences at the tabletop activities for the children. So reaching out to those professionals is really, really a very good thing to do. And most school systems have these occupational therapists and physical therapists on contract. For children with special needs, tabletop activities also are an important opportunity to develop vocabulary and concepts. If children are truly engaged in the activity, hearing the teacher use keywords several times as the event occurs provides a major boost to vocabulary and concept development. So to ensure that these activities are effective in supporting vocabulary, especially for children with a language delay or disability, we want to make sure that we do these things. We want to plan the vocabulary ahead of time. Pick out the necessary words that you're going to concentrate on in a reading, like when you're reading a story. Just don't let it happen by chance. Like, you need to plan. Pick out those words ahead of time. Repeat those words several times and encourage the children to say the words along with you. And then also repeat the activity several times. Oftentimes, children with special needs will have difficulty learning from one single event. And so they may need that activity done several times so that they learn what it is that you're presenting to them, okay? Development of representational skills. Art activities provide a real focused opportunity to assist children with special needs in the development of representational skills. So what is representational skills? A lot of times kids with a child with special needs may not have already developed like an appreciation for two-dimensional representations or having drawn simple figures. So, and when we're talking about two-dimensional shapes or representations, those are really critical in development of skills, some symbolic skills, and also in literacy. So early childhood teachers can play a real critical role in helping children with special needs develop representational skills. Also enhancing early math skills. It's amazing what might be referred to as math readiness skills, and they're often encouraged through tabletop activities involving like hands-on sensory motor approach to learning. Manipulatives, we can teach counting with those, number sense, numeration, concepts of larger, bigger, smaller, more than, less than, counting, noting differences and similarities of objects. I took a picture of a little screenshot of your textbook talking about number sense, rote counting, patterning, geometry, measurement, estimation, and it kind of shows you like and tells you some things that you could say. Setting the table, for example, just allowing someone to set the table allows to reinforce that one-to-one correspondence. And you'll see I kind of underlined that there, but also there's some things that you could actually use in your classroom, and it's kind of some dialogue that you could use there in developing and enhancing those early math skills. This was an interesting thing to me. I'd never heard this word before, and so I wanted to focus in on this. Strategies for children with tactile defensiveness, okay? So when I was reading through this chapter, when I saw that, I thought, tactile defensiveness. So what is tactile defensiveness? And then when I read the definition, I thought, oh yeah, okay, I just had never heard it called that before. Avoiding tactile contact, okay, basically touch of is called tactile defensiveness. Any fine motor task that requires coming in contact with a variety of unfamiliar textures and materials can be very stressful for children with special needs. So and especially a lot of times, I know they brought this up, or tactile defensiveness, you see this a lot in children with autism. And though children with autism are becoming much more prevalent in our schools, and so I really thought it would be good for you to hear about this particular piece of this chapter, and for us to talk about it a little bit more in depth. So what are some strategies for tactile defensiveness? Using hand-underhand guidance. So instead of you putting your hand over over the child's hand and guiding their hands through the required movements, you could use something called the hand-underhand guidance, where you allow them to experience you put the child's hand on top of your hand and guide them through the activity initially, okay? Which this kind of allows them to feel more in control. And once they become familiar with the activity, then you can try to guide their hands through it. But just putting their hands over on the top of your hand and moving through is a very good idea. Also using something called the PREMAC principle. I had never really heard of this either, and I thought this was a great idea for children who may have this tactile defensiveness, but also with just any other child when we're talking about undesirable activities or an unpleasant task, excuse me, I can't talk, an unpleasant task for a child. So the PREMAC principle just simply states that an unpleasant task or activity should be followed up by a pleasant or highly desired task, like something that they really enjoy doing. So when they do something they don't necessarily enjoy, then follow it up with something that they do. We can incorporate the child's security object as we're trying to get them into these activities, and also providing physical boundaries. So when children are very close to one another, or they're tempted to grab another child's things that they're working with, working on like a plastic tray or shelf line or placemat usually provides those physical boundaries, and a lot of times will discourage disruption. So, in a nutshell, tabletop activities can be motivating for young children with special needs, particularly if they are carefully selected and planned, and if they are repeated often enough to give children a sense of mastery. These activities also provide important opportunities to work on specific skills that are part of the child's IEP. Tabletop activities can also present significant challenges to many children, particularly if they do not understand the activity or if the activity presents too many physical challenges. Several strategies can be used to increase children's successful participation in these activities. And you can reference your textbook and you'll see a list of adaptations that are discussed in this chapter. So thanks for joining in, and I will see you next week for chapter 11.